Machu Picchu. The city, the Spanish conquistadors never even found. Spanish conquistadors tore through the Inca Empire, melted down its gold, and destroyed its capital. They never found this city. It sat completely undisturbed, hidden on a mountain ridge above the clouds for nearly 400 years, until an American explorer stumbled onto it while searching for something else entirely. By the early 16th century, the Inca Empire controlled the largest and most sophisticated political and territorial network in the pre-Columbian Americas, stretching across a vast swath of West and South America, before Spanish conquistadors under Francisco Pizarro arrived in 1532 and, through a combination of superior weaponry, opportunistic exploitation of an ongoing Inca civil war, and devastating European diseases that had already ravaged the population before Spanish forces even fully arrived, systematically dismantled the empire over the following decades, capturing and executing the Inca ruler, plundering the empire's extraordinary accumulated gold and silver, and eventually destroying or repurposing many of the empire's most significant cities and religious sites. Machu Picchu, constructed sometime in the mid-15th century under the Inca ruler Pachacuti, situated on a narrow mountain ridge nearly 8,000 feet above sea level in the Peruvian Andes, appears to have served as a royal estate and religious retreat, based on the sophistication of its architecture and the presence of temples and structures suggesting significant ceremonial importance, rather than as a purely administrative or military center comparable to the empire's larger, better-known cities that Spanish forces did eventually locate and destroy. What makes Machu Picchu's survival genuinely remarkable is that, unlike the Inca capital and other major administrative centers that Spanish forces specifically targeted, conquered, and often deliberately destroyed or repurposed, Machu Picchu appears to have never been discovered by Spanish colonial forces at all, based on the complete absence of any Spanish colonial-era documentation referencing the site, along with the site's structures showing no evidence of the deliberate destruction or religious desecration Spanish forces characteristically inflicted on Inca religious sites they did locate and conquer. Historians studying this genuine historical gap generally attribute Machu Picchu's survival to a combination of specific geographic and circumstantial factors: the site's remote, difficult-to-access mountain location, situated along a ridge considerably removed from the major roads and population centers. Spanish forces primarily focused their conquest efforts around, combined with the strong possibility that the site may have already been abandoned by its original Inca inhabitants by the time Spanish forces arrived in the region, whether due to the same smallpox epidemics that had already devastated Inca population centers before Spanish forces' direct arrival, or due to a deliberate, strategic Inca decision to abandon and conceal certain remote sites specifically to protect them from the advancing Spanish conquest already devastating the empire's more accessible territories. Following this apparent abandonment, Machu Picchu remained known only to a small number of local indigenous families living in the surrounding region, who maintained some degree of ongoing awareness of the site's existence and location across the following centuries, even as broader international and academic historical knowledge of the site's existence faded almost entirely from the wider world's awareness, a genuine, significant gap in documented historical knowledge that persisted for close to 400 years following the site's apparent abandonment. Machu Picchu's reintroduction to broader international and academic attention came in 1911, when American historian and explorer Hiram Bingham, conducting an expedition specifically searching for Vilcabamba, the last refuge city of Inca resistance forces following the initial Spanish conquest, was guided to Machu Picchu's location by local Peruvian farmers already aware of the site's existence, a detail worth noting since Bingham's celebrated discovery more accurately represented the first documented introduction of the site to international academic attention, rather than a genuine first discovery in any literal sense, given the site's continuous, if limited, awareness among local communities throughout the intervening centuries. Bingham initially believed, incorrectly, that he had actually located Vilcabamba itself, the specific lost city he had originally been searching for, a misidentification that took decades of subsequent archaeological research to definitively correct, since Vilcabamba, it was later established, was actually a separate site located elsewhere, meaning Bingham's genuinely significant discovery of Machu Picchu occurred, in a sense, as an unplanned byproduct of his search for an entirely different lost city he never actually found during that specific expedition. Bingham's documentation of the site, published and promoted extensively through National Geographic magazine and subsequent academic and popular publications, rapidly transformed Machu Picchu from a locally known but internationally obscure archaeological site into one of the most celebrated and recognizable archaeological discoveries of the 20th century. Formally designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1983 and selected as one of the new 7 wonders of the world, through a global public vote in 2007, achieving a level of international recognition that would have seemed genuinely unimaginable to the small local communities who had quietly maintained knowledge of the site through the centuries when the wider world had entirely forgotten it existed. What makes Machu Picchu's story endure as one of history's most compelling examples of a lost civilization site, surviving specifically through the same colonial conquest that destroyed so much of the surrounding empire, isn't simply the genuine architectural and engineering sophistication the site itself represents. Remarkable as the Incas' stone construction techniques and mountain agricultural systems genuinely remain even by modern standards, but the specific, almost ironic historical circumstance that allowed one of the Inca Empire's most significant surviving sites to escape the same systematic destruction that erased so much of the empire's broader physical and cultural legacy, precisely because it sat hidden above the clouds, in exactly the kind of remote, difficult location the conquistadors who destroyed everything else the empire had built never thought or never managed to reach. If stories like this, where the very remoteness that made a place seem insignificant is exactly what allowed it to survive when everything around it didn't, are exactly what you come here for, subscribe to The Grave Details, because history holds more stories like this than most people will ever know.